I want to get to that. And also, the Supreme Court declined today to hear Argentina's appeal over that country's battle with hedge funds that refused to take part in its debt restructuring. If you are familiar with what happened in Argentina in the early 2000s, I think it was 2001, 2002, and there was an attempt to restructure the debt that equaled about $100 billion. Now, you have to keep in mind that what the international banking community, the IMF, the World Bank, what they wanted Argentina to do was completely unravel its social safety net, all its education, its health care, everything in order to pay these bloodsuckers. Argentina refused, saying that its population was more important than some of these hedge fund managers. We'll get to that a little bit later also. So the Supreme Court ruled today that Argentina's appeal, or I mean they declined today to hear Argentina's appeal with those hedge funds that refused to take part in the debt restructuring. It's an example of how capitalism can take a country. You know, we talk about this all the time, how the U.S. has the unnerving ability to destabilize, overthrow, undermine, and destroy other countries, their economies, their populations, their infrastructure, everything. And it's not so much the United States as it is capitalism. And this is just one example. We'll get to that. What I received today was an email from Hernan in Argentina. Hernan runs the Malloy YouTube site. Is that right, Kathy? If you go to YouTube and, look for Mike Malloy, you'll find bunches of Malloy videos that Hernan has posted, and he manages that site. He sent me this email, and he said, Mike, do you want to see how world dominance works? Take a look at what happened today with the Supreme Court and the I'm just going to say it the American way because I'm used to saying it, the Argentinian case. Hernan writes, U.S. Supreme Court declined on Monday to hear Argentina's appeal over its battle with hedge funds that refused to take part in the debt restructuring from way back in 2002. An unexpected move, Hernan writes, that risks toppling Latin America's #3 economy into a new default. Argentina restructured the illegal debt that caused the IMF intervention in the country with the old remedies that destroyed the middle class and generated 50% of the population in poverty. However, Argentina recovered and restructured the debt. 92% of the people or the agencies or the organizations to whom this money was owed agreed to the restructuring. The other 8% bought junk bonds at a lower price, and now they want payment in full. And we're talking about over $1 billion here. Creditors holding about 93% of Argentina's bonds agreed to participate in the two debt swaps in 2005 and 2010, accepting between 25 and 29 cents on the dollar. Now, the ruling, according to Sebastian Centurion at ABC Exchange, a ruling, quote, this is surprising because it is giving a precedent for any vulture fund to go against any country, so any country is vulnerable in a restructure. Now, Argentina, as Hernan writes, is a country that recovered from the last blow and started increasing social measures for the poor, minorities, unemployed, people with children, gay rights, and so on. And Argentina is again on the verge of defaulting at the expense of people suffering because a couple of millionaires in the United States decided that owning everything is not enough. They want more. I'll tell you, there should be building a resentment against the ultra wealthy, not because they're ultra wealthy, but because of what they do with their wealth. That's the problem. The right wing wants America to believe that those of us on the left hate the rich because they're rich, which is a goddamn lie. We hate the rich because of what they do with their enormous piles of money and what they don't do. They don't invest in the United States. They don't invest in their workforce, no matter how productive the workforce is. What they do is become so consumed with greed. I mean, the idea of having at your disposal $1 billion is an idea that you and I simply cannot conceive of. No, we can't. We might be able to do the math in our head, but to own $1,000 million is not comprehensible for the average person like you and like me. It just isn't. But to own 100 times that is just off the charts of the ability to even think of the number. And yet, the three Walmart heirs control $140 billion in assets. So it's not the rich that we hate. It's what the rich do, the way they avoid paying taxes, where the average bookkeeper has to pay taxes. The average waitress or waiter or talk show host or gas station jockey has to pay taxes. But these filthy bastards do everything they can on top of their enormous wealth to avoid contributing anything to the very culture, the capitalist system that provided them with the wherewithal and the loopholes and the workforce to steal all of these assets. There is a day of reckoning coming. I don't know if I'll be around to see it, but I would tell you this, that this force against the ultra-wealthy is building internationally, and eventually it's going to explode, and there is going to be a spasm of violence that will probably remind historians of the terror after the French Revolution, or during the, well, actually the terror came after the French Revolution, where that spasm of violence becomes uncontrollable. And I shudder to think what's going to happen if that does occur. We'll be right back. More on Argentina when we come back. You heard what Hernan, our correspondent in Argentina, sent to me. Now, from the Reuters news agency, here's the way it's being reported, not just in the United States, but wherever Reuters is a viable news organization. Here's what it says. U.S. Supreme Court declined on Monday to hear Argentina's appeal over its battle with hedge funds that refused to take part in its debt restructuring, an unexpected move that risks toppling Latin America's #3 economy into a new default. Now, think about that for a second. I mean, $1.33 billion is all, and I realize that's a number you and I have a difficulty comprehending, except maybe in a mathematical way and only in theory. But that's 1.33% of what the debt was when Argentina found itself in default, because the IMF and the World Bank had come in and stolen everything it could get its hands on so that the capitalists would be satisfied. It's a little bit more complex to explain than I would be able to do on this radio program, but I'll tell you what you can do. If you want to know exactly what happened, just do a Google on Argentina debt default, and all the information will be there for you. So let me just go to what the Supreme Court said today in refusing to hear Argentina's appeal. The Supreme Court left intact a lower court ruling that ordered Argentina to pay $1.33 billion to the so-called holdouts who refused the debt swaps in the wake of Argentina's 2001-2002 default on $100 billion. This could open the door to claims from other holdouts worth as much as $15 billion more, which is a hell of a sum for a slowly recovering economy struggling with rapidly dwindling foreign reserves. Argentina, South America, Central America has always been a target of U.S. corporate or capitalist interests. One of the reasons that President James Monroe put in place the Monroe Doctrine was to keep, I don't care what your history book says, it was to keep the prying eyes of foreign countries, prevent them from seeing the dirty work that American capitalists were doing. Whether it was Mexico or Central America or South America, it's been in so many instances just an absolute case of massive theft, fraud, destruction, destabilization by U.S. corporate interests. I'm sorry, it's difficult talking about this, being an American, being a citizen of this country, knowing what we did in Vietnam, knowing what we did in Afghanistan and Iraq, knowing what we've done to Iran and Guatemala, knowing what we tried to do in Venezuela, knowing what we did in Argentina. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. Now, you didn't do it, and I didn't do it, and you and I will never share in the kind of filthy, stinking profits that these capitalists have stolen. That's their money. See, it's not ours. It doesn't belong to Argentina. They think it's theirs. And they will continue to do this. As long as we have this kind of a predatory system, it's going to continue and continue until, finally, the rest of the world rises up and says, you know what? We've had enough. We've had enough. Now, I'm not saying the rest of the world is going to rise up and invade the U.S. and UK and start wholesale slaughter, although God forbid that might happen, in which case we drop our nukes. What I'm saying is the rest of the world may rise up and say, you know what? We're going to isolate the United States. Now, I know, that's like, what? That could never happen. If you have nearly 7 billion people say to 330 million, we don't like, look at what the United States did to Argentina. I mean, you can look at countries where this has happened. Now, the United States, the biggest economy on the globe, the most powerful military, yada, 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 yada. But the rest of the world is not going to continue to allow itself to be, I don't want to say raped, because that has a different meaning, but brutalized, stolen from, defrauded, murdered, killed, invaded, destabilized. Anyway, the news that the Supreme Court declined to hear Argentina's appeal had the immediate effect of triggering a nosedive in Argentine stocks and bonds after investors expected the court to delay its decision and give Argentina time to negotiate with the holdouts or restructure its exchange bonds outside of legislation imposed on it outside of their country. The impact, Reuters reports, on global markets was muted given Argentina's economic isolation since its default. That was the other thing. And the IMF and the World Bank is doing this to Greece. It's doing it to Portugal. It tried to do it to Iceland, and Iceland just gave them all the middle finger and said, we don't care what you do. Take your goddamn debt and your bonds and everything that you say we owe you and stuff it where the sun don't shine. We're going to concentrate on our own people. We're going to concentrate on what's going on here. And Iceland doesn't have the millionaires and the billionaires. The millionaires and the billionaires live somewhere else. And basically the same thing happened to Ireland, Portugal. It continues to happen until this particular system of this predatory capitalism is finally, for once and for all, replaced with something that is rational, reasonable. Well, I think it should be utterly destroyed. I agree with Noam Chomsky that we've got to go back to the idea of economic collectives in order to continue to have a human race on this planet. Economic collectives that then trade with each other if they want to. But again, it comes back to the destruction of the greed factor. Capitalism induces greed that is just astonishing. And greed, in turn, fosters more capitalism. It is a filthy, stinking, horrific economic system. And it guarantees that the capital will be concentrated in as few hands as possible, and the masses of people, the rest of us, can just piss off. If we can't survive eating grass and rocks and bark and roots and so on and so forth, that's our misfortune. The wealthy do not care. What they care about is their money, their capital, their British pounds, their euros, their shekels, their whatever the hell it is that they are accumulating. And if people die and families are destroyed and land is ripped to pieces and natural resources are torn out of the earth and the environment is polluted, they don't care. Surely this is registered by this point in your life. It's registered in mine. Hasn't it registered that this idea that capitalism and the people who manipulate the strings of capitalism really don't care if you die? In fact, they want you dead as soon as they can extract from you your labor, which translates into wealth for them. I mean, how many examples of this do we have to see before it finally sinks in? And in the meantime, the lie and the deception continues. Oh, well, you could be a rich capitalist too. No, you can't. You really can't, especially not now. Especially not now. If it were the 18th century or the mid 19th century, you might have a chance. If you were able to exploit your neighbors and your country and your state, your county, and the workers, maybe you could do it too. Maybe you could climb to that bloody top of capitalism. But it ain't going to happen now. You're not going to invent the next Yahoo or the next Facebook. You're not. I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to suffer your miserable little life just like I am, because the capitalists are going to determine how much you have, when you lose it, when you get it, when they take it away from you. It's not up to you. But they sell you on the idea that here, especially in the land of the free and the home of the brave and in capitalism, you can do anything you want to do. No, you can't. Take a look at Argentina as the latest example. Or don't. I don't know. Let me just sum this up. I would hope that Argentina looks after its own self-interest and the self-interest of its people and its children and its poor and its workers and its institutions and its universities and its medical system and its social welfare system. I hope Argentina takes a look inward and says to the rest of the world, here's the middle finger. We didn't plan this. We didn't want this. This is what you all did to us, and now you even want to carve up the corpse. Read this. That's what I hope. We'll be right back.